Thank you, Chair. I represent WEDO, a 30-year-old global advocacy organization working towards gender and climate justice. And we were created around the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, which, as we know, began the process that eventually became the SDGs. We accompanied the post-2015 process and the Open Working Group, and we were inspired by the ambitious commitment of the 2030 Agenda to take a holistic approach across the three dimensions of sustainable development. And it's truly troubling to witness how little has changed in the global balance of power and resources since the creation of both WEDO and the Women's Major Group, and how despite all of the energy and enthusiasm around the agreement of the SDGs, how unlikely any of them are to be met. The mention in the draft pact for the future of the post-2030 process of starting all over again makes me want to cry with frustration and cynicism. As we heard in the presentation of the SDGs Progress Report, SDG 13 is one of the most off-track of all of the off-track goals. In its bar chart, there is no green at all. Similar data from the climate finance arena shows that even modest commitments are not being met anywhere near the scale required if you look at grants-based, non-debt creating finance. It goes without saying we are badly, dangerously off track. And why is that? It's because there can be no tinkering around the edges when it comes to the climate crisis. Current conversations around net zero, carbon offsets, geoengineering, these are false solutions meant to keep business as usual alive. But it's not possible to mitigate or adapt to or account for the loss and damage caused by this global phenomenon without a real reckoning in terms of the global redistribution of resources and power between wealthy countries and the global majority that provided the resources for the creation of their wealth, between men on the one hand and women and non-binary people on the other, and between the global elite and those facing all forms of marginalization, especially indigenous peoples, as we heard so eloquently from our colleague, racialized people, and LGBTQIA+ folks. Truly grappling with and turning the tides of the climate crisis requires fundamentally transforming the way our economies function. As the climate crisis and ecological devastation are caused by the industrial practices and harmful overconsumption of corporations and people, primarily in the global north, redressing them requires an end to our extractive neoliberal white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, as Bell Hooks said. It probably requires dismantling and replacing our current set of international financial institutions. It requires new regimes for debt cancellation and progressive taxation. It requires ending conflict, which is many times driven by resource consumption and genocide. And it requires the protection, and in many countries, including this one, the creation of democratic practices and the fulfillment of human rights of all. That's the conversation we need to be having. As we heard, 1.5 is already here. There is no going back. We can and must only go forward. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Women's Major Group for her statement.